you have got, I think it's about a $200 price tag, outperform on Alphabet. How can they live up to the, prior to this day, 10-day run-up, a longest winning streak for Alphabet that we've seen since 2010, Brad?
Yeah, there's a couple of kind of cross-current things going on. I think first on the fundamental side, we're going to see really good numbers. Our checks through the quarter were fairly strong, and I do expect them to print upside tonight. So I think that's kind of why you've seen the market price that in a little bit and run the stock up here in front of the print. Offsetting that, maybe not quite as good from a forward setup perspective is net, once they print numbers tonight, say what they say, then we've got to sit around and wait 2, 3, 4 weeks for this regulatory decision out of the judge that obviously will scare some people. So.
And let's just think about that regulatory overhang. We love reading your notes, and really you were talking about how this is a strong fundamentally company, but challenged thematically and awaiting regulatory wildcard. We await what Judge Mehta says in August. But when you think about the challenge thematically, any numbers that you're going to be looking at that would tell you that there is competition in terms of search, that ChatGPT is eating in to their breadwinner?
Yeah, I mean, they'll obviously, again, they'll print the numbers tonight. I do expect them to be good. And so just objectively on that piece of it, I think they'll have a really strong case and story to tell on the conference call around why AI is good for their business. They're not going to directly address sort of the competitive threats, but they will definitely be, I think, in a good position tonight to position AI as sort of nothing but a good thing for the business. But yeah, I think the point of our note was, the numbers will be good. They can say what they want, but the reality is, so long as ChatGPT, Perplexity, Anthropic, there's a number of companies that are really making a lot of headway on the AI front. Everyone's well aware of that bear case, that AI narrative against Google's core business is not going anywhere for the foreseeable future.
Brad, the technology story I see is quite simple. How does the Gemini model become more embedded across all of Google's business? But I guess I'd love to know where you want to see it show up in the financial results to give you faith that the payoff is there.
Yeah, I think the most important piece, and it's not, I don't think it gets enough focus, is Gemini, the model, right? Partially it's just because of the brand, people have learned the name. It's obviously driving the Gemini app, and that is important. Where we're actually really focused is certainly on AI overviews, but bringing Gemini to AI mode. I call it my mom test, right? When my mom is suddenly using some of these tools, we know they're really hitting sort of broad-based. In fairness, my mom doesn't do a lot with technology, so there it is. But the point is that if you're spoon-feeding AI mode to people that would ultimately just be coming to Google for normal purposes, and you've got the power of a really solid set of Gemini models, that's where I think it becomes a bigger and bigger tailwind for these guys.
Brad, we got the White House's AI action plan this morning, 23 pages. I printed it out for you, so for some light reading. Later in the program, we'll get into the details and the politics of it. But the simple question is whether or not Alphabet is going to be a beneficiary of what this administration wants America to do in AI. Do you think it will be?
Generally, yes, but I do think there's going to be more and more attention paid to how sort of equitable the value distribution is of AI. I think that's something we spend a lot of time thinking about these days, which is, I think if you look at the parts and pieces of what we know of AI today, it would suggest that a lot of the value could accrue to only a very few number of companies. And I don't think that's going to work bigger picture from a regulatory perspective. And the reason we like Google in that perspective is Google is the distributor of traffic, right? The biggest one on the internet. And I don't see that changing. And so I actually think that plays quite well into the regulatory framework going forward.
Let's go to regulatory overhang just for last case though, Brad, because that is the cloud you signal coming in August. What do you brace for?
Yeah.
Do you think Judge Mehta would break up the company?
Short answer is we don't think so. I think that we ascribe kind of a lower probability to that. But there's sort of 2 or 3 things we think about. Number one is you're not going to be able to pay for placement on default search. We're pretty certain that is going away. 2, there could be some sort of opening up the kimono on data that Google has to competitors. We actually don't think that matters that much, but that could certainly play out. And then the third one is the divestiture potential of Chrome. And there our stance is, Chrome's not a business, it's a product. I think maybe the DOJ comments sort of ignored that piece in their aspirations to have that piece of it removed. And so ultimately, they could force them to do that. It's certainly possible, but then you're introducing a whole other set of issues, as we've seen Perplexity, OpenAI, all these companies talking about opening browsers, right? It's clearly going to be very important for distribution. It seems incredibly arbitrary to sort of hand away Google's browser in the hands of another when they're saying that is going to be critical to the technology innovation here for the future. It would just be handing value away. So we see low likelihood of that happening.